I wrote 200 films before sound came in.
Hello all, and welcome to our final video lesson for Women Behind the Camera this semester, a combination of Class 13 Minority Women and Class 14 Questioning the Gender Barrier. Before we get started, however, your attendance assignment for tonight is as follows. Go to the Assignments tab of Web Campus and take the final pop quiz! That's right, same rules as always. You will just have to do it all in one sitting, etc., etc. So pause the video and go do that. Take pop quiz number 5 right now. Okay, you did it! Good job. Now, I want to go over the results from your hidden assignment last week, starting with the fact that I was really surprised and, encouraged by the fact that I got a lot of responses from female students who felt the same way about the portrayal of the bride as a catatonic rape victim in Kill Bill. This is particularly important because this is the first time that I have gotten validation about this, basically, in like the moment when the movie came out. All my friends were really into it. We were much younger, and obviously, that part bothered me even at the time, and yet, many of my friends, granted most of them male, treated me like I was the weirdo for not, enjoying every part of the film, including one boy who got mad at me for getting hung up and fixated on this really unimportant part of the film, in which, the bride is, yet another one of these female characters who is needlessly raped, and I was seen as like the Philistine who didn't appreciate great filmic art, and I think it bears, mentioning how important it is for other women to share their narratives and their experiences, because up until this moment, I thought maybe I was the only person in the universe who felt this way. I have since discovered that I am not. Perhaps this is a very normal response from female viewers to this kind of content, and I think that, hashtag #MeToo has taught us sharing female narratives, or just sharing the perspectives of people who are not, the mainstream demographic for which media is made, is really important, and a very crucial way that we get things to change, that we get portrayals and representations to be improved in the future. So thank you guys, kudos, that is a very important piece of the puzzle, and always, I would encourage everyone to always speak their minds when they see issues like this in film. So, that said, I also wanted to talk about the other portion of the hidden assignment, in which the overwhelming majority of this class expressed the idea that had they been in charge of German film releases in 1935, that they would have definitely censored the film Triumph of the Will, banning it from release so as to prevent the rise in Nazi sentiment that it is known to have contributed to. Despite some students expressing mixed feelings over concerns for artistic freedom, out of the entire class, only one student said that they would not censor the film for this reason. In fact, only one student said that they would not censor the film at all. But a handful of students came up with a few very interesting alternate options outside of the proposed binary of censor the film or let it play, and I wanted to discuss those for a minute here. Of the proposed alternatives, the first that I'll highlight here is the suggestion of allowing the film to play, but with a disclaimer. Some students said a very strong disclaimer, perhaps even bookending the film both before and after with such a statement, expressing that this film, glorifies the Nazis and is a piece of political propaganda to be wary of, etc., etc. Personally, I think that this is a reasonable option, provided that the film is not playing in Germany in 1935, as that was a time and place, as many of you pointed out, that was extremely susceptible to an increase in fascist sentiment due to an ongoing economic depression and a great loss of political face after losing World War I, that positioned the German populace to be extremely unusually extra vulnerable to the easy solution of blindly following a fascist party. I think having a disclaimer bookend Triumph of the Will might be a reasonable solution for screening the film today or at places and times other than 1930s Germany. But personally, I doubt that this measure alone would have been enough to prevent the film from causing a rise in Nazi sentiment in Germany in 1935. As some of you pointed out, a large portion of the population who saw this film was uneducated. Another significant demographic was very young, and these types of groups tend to be much more susceptible to propaganda than educated adults with well-polished critical thinking skills. As such, as I said, I doubt a disclaimer screened before and after the film would be enough to counteract the negative impact of Triumph of the Will, especially when taking these types of viewers into consideration. Another alternative that a couple of you proposed was to censor the film from mainstream release, but to either archive it in a museum or have it play only to small audiences in an academic context. This strikes me as a very reasonable alternative, as it satisfies the argument in favor of preserving rather than destroying artistic pieces, even when those pieces contain toxic political messages, and yet prevents this particular toxic message from spreading virally to a mass audience via a mass media platform. I had one student raise the very interesting point of the parallel between destroying films with which we disagree and the Nazis' own habit of burning books and other materials that went against their twisted ideology. Obviously, no one here ever said that we should destroy every copy of Triumph of the Will and set them all on fire or anything like that. Even among the vast majority of the class who agreed that the film should be censored, nobody made statements to that effect. But archiving the film and treating it as an artifact that belongs in a museum, perhaps one devoted to the study of understanding and fighting political fascism, helps bring us further away from the Nazis' own tendency to destroy what they disagreed with, satisfies the idea of freedom of expression without endangering the public good, and places the film in an archival or museum context in which it cannot do the kind of damage that it otherwise could as a mainstream mass film release. All of this, makes this option strike me as a very good one indeed. So kudos to those of you who suggested it. But yet another alternative was proposed by two students in this class to bring empiricism into the question by actually testing the film with focus groups so as to study their reactions and demonstrably prove through their feedback whether or not the film is persuasive enough to have a potentially negative effect on the populace. Assuming that the sample size of this focus group of viewers was large enough without being so large as to constitute a significant threat in the form of a rise in Nazi sentiment if the film proved too effective, of course, and assuming that the experiment was carried out scientifically and well enough, perhaps based on the behavioral science research on the effects of media on children that are regularly carried out for programs like Sesame Street to this day. There's some really, really solid behavioral research on children's media. So assuming all of this was scientifically well handled, this actually might be one of the best alternative options that was proposed. This option takes the vague, nebulous unknown, the question of whether or not Triumph of the Will, has the power to convince people to become Nazi supporters in the first place, and turns it into a known. In this way, we could have empirically measured what percentage of audiences were swayed by the film, who was the most susceptible, what effects it had in general, and all of this sort of thing. And with this knowledge, we could have proved whether or not Triumph of the Will was even effective as Nazi propaganda at all in the first place, whether the rise in Nazi sentiment in the mid-1930s in Germany was largely due to other circumstances, or whether this film actually was the major deciding factor that historians and film scholars have always believed it to be. This focus group approach takes the nebulous, unknowable, philosophical elements of the question and turns them into empirical science, from which we can derive hard, tangible, solid, real answers. Overall, this idea strikes me as a very, very good one, a very intriguing thought indeed, so kudos to those of you who proposed it. But one student raised a point, both in the hidden assignment answer and in last week's post-class Zoom meeting, that I feel is extremely salient and a crucial piece of the puzzle, very relevant to us here tonight. This student made the critical distinction between propaganda and other kinds of art, pointing out, I thought very cogently, that propaganda is inherently different from other kinds of artistic media because it serves an inherently different purpose. In general, non-propagandistic art serves the purpose of either entertaining, educating, or otherwise eliciting a wide variety of different thoughts, feelings, and emotions from everyone who sees it. In contrast, propaganda is intended to only elicit one singular response from everyone. And when that intended response is destructive and the propaganda in question is effective in eliciting it, you have on your hands the potential, that is, for great harm, often harm that takes the form of widespread violence and fascist thinking, as in the case of the Nazis, or perhaps the sentiments we're seeing from slightly less than half of the voting population in our own nation today. This is a crucial distinction to make, the distinction between propaganda and other kinds of art, as it highlights the ultimate core issue that makes propaganda a threatening concept in the first place. It's also important to note, I think, that though U.S. law does not officially distinguish between propaganda and other kinds of content when it comes to things like First Amendment free speech rights, there are some laws in place that do make this distinction, albeit in a less direct way. Like, for example, the stipulations in the Children's Television Act of 1990, which limit the amount of commercial content allowed in children's television programming blocks. It is not explicitly stated, but I believe it is easily understood that advertising is itself a form of propaganda in that it is intended to elicit an identical response from everyone in its intended audience, which is, of course, the desire to purchase the product being advertised. Because of its manipulative nature and the understanding of children's susceptibility to this type of manipulation, there are legal limits in place when it comes to this particular kind of propaganda. Propaganda in general, whether actual political propaganda or mere advertisement, encourages a certain psychological phenomenon called viral mimetic thinking. Viral mimetic thinking. Viral mimetic thinking is a relatively new concept within psychological research. It is understood, fascinatingly, as a kind of psychological virus. Not a physical disease, but a kind of thought virus, if you will, a toxic idea that spreads virally like a meme, hence mimetic. It actually is from that same root word, virally mimetic thinking, from person to person or spreading through propaganda, and has a tendency to lead people into a lot of very problematic behavior, perhaps most notably destructive behavior against people perceived as outsiders, outgroup members, or others. Interestingly, critical thinking skills seem to be able to combat this thought virus along the lines of the human immune system, to continue our metaphor, and there also seems to be a phenomenon in which certain people appear to be somewhat inoculated against viral mimetic thinking, against this thought virus, specifically in cases where individuals were raised as members of a historically persecuted group, like the Jews or, the African American community or Native Americans or what have you, and hence have a much higher likelihood of recognizing this type of behavior and this type of thought process for what it is and questioning it early on before it has the chance to seriously affect them. Viral mimetic thinking is a relatively new concept in psychology and was originally applied to the idea of religion at its foundation, specifically the reality that most religious people, become members of their given religion either because of their parents or sometimes because of charismatic individuals convincing them to join a new faith, not because they were swayed to do so by evidence or logic. Viral mimetic thinking is very obviously also applicable in much more extreme and concerning cases to groups like religious cults, the KKK, the Nazis, and unfortunately also the devoutest followers of the current lame duck incumbent president, whom I think should be understood at this point as distinct and separate from normal Republicans once seen in this nation's politics. You may have noticed over the course of the last 4 years, for example, a certain lack of interest in evidence and facts coming from this portion of the population. That's a huge red flag. That's a warning sign. A certain inability for such people to be swayed by any kind of evidence or hard proof. This is concerning. One student brought up the psychological concept of belief preservation in their hidden assignment, that old issue that we've brought up before, in which human beings tend to believe whatever they heard first more strongly than whatever they heard later, which is irrational inherently, and that people will be just inherently more doubtful and less willing to accept new information if it conflicts with their pre-existing beliefs. An unfortunate function of viral mimetic thinking is that it tends to place value in blind faith, as if being unable to reason through critical thinking were some kind of a virtue, and also tends to encourage people to believe that they are under attack, usually by an outsider group whose threat to them is imaginary, as the Jews were to the Nazis, the black population is the KKK, it is to the KKK, that is, or the liberals are to the cult of Trump. This belief in a threat coming from an outgroup taps right into our primal evolutionary hardwiring. The human species emerged out of the cradle of humanity alongside many other human-like but non-human hominid species, including Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo floresiensis, or hobbits, as some scientists have charmingly nicknamed them, with whom we competed for the same resources for our survival at the dawn of our species' existence. You may notice, however, that those species are no longer here. What do you think happened? And Homo sapiens, the sole survivors, still have a noticeable tendency towards tribalism to this day, the capacity to hate and fear those who seem similar to, but slightly different from, one's own in-group. This instinct was likely valuable in creating the circumstances in which humanity survived as the sole advanced hominid species out of all of its ancient brethren, but it remains in our DNA despite its present-day irrelevance and uselessness to us, and has proven itself time and time again to be one of humanity's greatest weaknesses. This tribal weakness of ours is a prime target for exploitation by those who would take advantage of our fears for their own personal gain and, who would lead us ultimately down the darkest path of human potential. Because here's the key, most crucial piece of the puzzle. When our tribal fears are exploited by charismatic liars and their propaganda outlets, and people fall into fascism and or cult worship or other kinds of viral mimetic thinking, not only do they tend to inflict needless harm upon the scapegoated outgroup, but they also tend to fall victims themselves to fascism's self-eating tendencies, the self-consuming aspects of viral mimetic thinking. There are no more non-human ancient hominids on this earth. We likely killed them all thousands of years ago out of similar fears. But our instincts have not yet evolved to the point of allowing us to recognize that fact. And when a fascist brand of viral mimetic thinking taps into our instincts of wanting to destroy the other to preserve our own species' survival, inevitably, once this goal is accomplished, once the other population is actually destroyed, the campaign of destruction does not simply stop there. That never actually happens. There is no moment when viral mimetic thinking dusts its hands off and says, okay, job well done, we're finished. No, instead, the fascist line of thinking then begins to search for perceived others within the loyal in-group. This always eventually happens, and this ultimately is the final reason why no one should ever engage in serious viral mimetic thinking, why no one should ever join a cult or support a fascist regime, because ultimately every in-group member will themselves eventually face the same destruction if, heaven forbid, the destructive genocidal goals of the in-group are ever actually achieved. Personally, I wish this lesson had been learned and taught much longer ago, much sooner. This, ultimately, is the lesson I feel that we should have taken from the Holocaust. Not simply the idea that the Holocaust happened long ago and far away in Germany in the distant past, but that deep within every individual human being is an evolutionary biological fluke, an inherent flaw within us that can be exploited for fascist political gain. It could happen anywhere, at any time, to anyone. And the way to fight against it, the way to resist it and make sure that it doesn't happen to you, the way that you make sure it doesn't control us, is to recognize that it is a self-eating phenomenon, that everyone who supports such a regime will themselves ultimately be in mortal danger from that regime if it is successful. And therefore, thinking critically to dispel the power of its fear-mongering is crucial. Putting yourself in the position of the hated outgroup is crucial. Seeing yourself, as a German citizen in 1935 and thinking, but what if I was a Jew, is crucial. That's because that's ultimately where this leads. We're all the Jews here. Basically, this in-group, out-group thinking is, of course, ultimately what enables humanity to wage war against itself, thus, posing an existential threat, ultimately, to the continued survival of our very species. If humanity is to continue to survive on this planet on into the future, it is crucial that we evolve past this tribal thinking pattern, and that begins with employing our critical thinking skills to recognize ourselves as the outgroup. We are all the outgroup, always, from the very start, and to use this perspective to defeat viral mimetic thinking and all that entails once and for all. It's also important, I feel, to start recognizing viral mimetic thinking for the contagious brain disease that it is, and stop normalizing it and deluding ourselves into a false belief that it's merely the expression of normal political opposition, which at this point it very clearly is not. All this begins, of course, I think, with new legislation regulating the use of propaganda and falsehoods in the media, particularly in programs that present themselves as news, both on television and online as elsewhere. So the incoming administration, of course, has its work cut out for it. If you want to help, please feel free to spread the word about this and keep the conversation going. And just in case any of you had the thought of, but how do we know that our side isn't the one engaged in viral mimetic thinking, Professor Saporin? I would say, good point. That's an example of critical thinking that, if explored further, would help you ensure that that's not what you were doing. And also, a good litmus test is to ask yourself the question of, would I put someone who disagreed with me in physical danger over whatever issue this is going on with? If the answer is yes, and the disagreeing person was not posing an active threat to anyone, then maybe this is viral mimetic thinking. If your in-group might do an out-group member physical violence, or if you yourself were to be wrongly identified as an out-group member to the rest of your in-group and risked violence from this misidentification, then maybe it's time to take a step back and reevaluate what's going on and what everybody in your in-group is doing. All this said, even non-propagandistic media can also have a serious hand in creating wrong thinking about a perceived outgroup. Don't think only propaganda has this power. Every misportrayal, every stereotype can also do similar things like this. Even where unintentional. A fact which relates us back to the main topic of our discussion for tonight, minority women and women who question the gender barrier. In spite of the relatively progressive films being created by women prior to the soft purge in film history, it should be noted again that the vast majority of women who held significant roles in the film industry, even at its earliest foundations, were white, or at least the ones who were most recorded were white. There may be a lot, more minority women who remain erased and need to be excavated, but this is, I think, a function of our racist and sexist hierarchies that govern this country and have for a very long time. Obviously, it bears mentioning that this, of course, has a lot to do with who holds power and privilege in a society, the thing that we're always saying, specifically not just a patriarchal but also a racist society. It should be noted that even prior to 1915's The Birth of a Nation, a piece of perhaps unintentional pro-KKK propaganda with a heinous history of horrific real-world implications that I doubt the filmmakers intended to create, even before that, the foundations of the very concept of American popular entertainment were in fact built upon the minstrel show, a musical performance involving white actors wearing blackface and performing all kinds of, racist stereotyped behavior for the entertainment of contemporary white audiences. The amount of damage that the minstrel show did to American popular perceptions about race, especially among white people, is at this point, I think, incalculable. But it bears mentioning that minstrel shows swept through the nation long before American slavery ended, long before Black Americans had migrated to cities in large numbers after the Civil War, and long before white audiences, even in northern states, would have been likely to have ever met or ever seen a real Black person in real life. Thus, a belief in the racist idea that African Americans were these, minstrel show made up cartoonish subhuman clowns, an idea, obviously widespread by this form of entertainment. This idea had already penetrated quite deeply, even in liberal areas, by the time that filmmaking was invented, and stood as a significant barrier that kept, and to a certain degree is still keeping, Black filmmakers of both genders out of the game to this day. So with that, I'm going to begin talking about, the first half of our lesson, Class 13, Minority Women. Before I begin, however, I feel I should apologize for the, multitude of omissions that I'm sure are about to happen. Because I had to combine the two lessons together, I wasn't able to include some of the women who you all had made me aware of in your midterm projects, which I deeply regret, but I was at least able to keep all the ones originally on the syllabus and add a few more crammed into the margins there. I apologize if the women who you suggested are not being used, but believe me, they are known and will be used in future semesters. This is just a function of the fact that we kind of lost a day here and have to cram it all together because somebody made a scheduling snafu. Anyway, that said, as we had mentioned in our earlier lesson on female silent filmmakers, there were a few heroic standouts who rose above the insurmountable odds of racism and perhaps to a lesser degree also sexism in the early silent era, specifically Tressie Saunders and Maria P. Williams, the first and second Black female film directors respectively that we know about, whose entire combined filmography unfortunately remains lost to this day, another part of the racist legacy that we have inherited from our filmic history that tends to preserve the work of white men over women and minorities, making the films of non-white women from the silent era especially under-circulated and hence not preserved. Again, lost films are turning up all over the world all the time, and it remains my sincerest hope that someday someone will discover copies of the filmic work of Tressie Saunders and Maria P. Williams, hopefully their most famous lost feature-length films, 1922's A Woman's Error, directed by Tressie Saunders, and 1923's The Flames of Wrath, produced, directed by, and starring Maria P. Williams. Those would be such a find, the holy grails, effectively, of, Black female cinema. Both films, very interestingly, were made after the Soft Purge, placing these women in an even more interesting historical context than otherwise. So fingers crossed, let's hope someday somebody finds these films. Something to look forward to. So when it comes to other non-white female filmmakers of the early silent era, we have at least two Hispanic women of note, Beatriz Michelena and Mimi Derba, both of whom started as musical stage performers, with Beatriz Michelena being a famous opera star. actually, and coming from a bloodline of famous opera stars, and Derba herself being a leading lady of the Spanish musical genre known as zarzuela. Beatriz Michelena produced and wrote multiple films, many of which she starred in for her own company, Beatriz Michelena Features, located in San Rafael, California. Unfortunately, few of her films exist, and the one that seems to exist in its most complete state, 1914's Salome Jane, is merely a film that she stars in, not one that she produced with her own company. Some footage does exist from 1919's Just Squaw, however, a film which she did produce and also starred in. So let's take a look at Beatriz Michelena in Just Squaw right now. The other Latina filmmaker whom we noted before, Mimi Derba, was a Mexican filmmaker who worked primarily in Mexico, of course, not the United States, and whose work, unfortunately, is also entirely lost, much like that of Tressie Saunders and Maria P. Williams, though lots of still photographs of Mimi Derba's films from press releases do still survive. Interestingly, you can see Mimi Derba here cross-dressing in a man's sombrero, making her, as we will note, one of many early female filmmakers known to have dressed in men's clothing, a sort of precursor to our point on female filmmakers questioning the gender barrier, whom we will be exploring later on. Two more Latina filmmakers of note, Adriana and Dolores Ehlers, a duo of sisters making films for the Mexican government, are worth noting here. This from the Women Film Pioneers Project page on the Ehlers sisters. The quote begins. They were appointed to the Mexican Ministry of Government, Adriana as chief of the censorship department and Dolores as chief of the Department of Cinematography, which included the laboratory for developing the documentary films both women shot. The censorship department was created with the intention of suppressing the demeaning images of Mexico and Mexicans that were common currency in U.S. films, as well as those scenes considered offensive to public morals. The sisters produced a number of films that celebrated Mexico in order to counter these negative stereotypes, filming parades and protests, the caves of Cacahuamilpa, the Teotihuacan ruins, and the National Museum of Archaeology, History, and Ethnography. They spent months touring the country and shooting a feature-length documentary about water treatment, carrying Bell and Howell universal cameras that weighed almost 80 pounds each. Take that, my former coworker who claimed that women can't lift heavy cameras. Anyway, the quote continues, "They processed their documentaries in the film laboratory at the Mexican Department of Cinematography, and these films were exhibited in schools, factories, governmental departments, and charity institutions." As women working in an exclusively male environment, the Ehlers sisters faced critical resistance, in part because they dressed in pants and were self-sufficient, maybe like some other women behind the camera that we know. These were also difficult years politically. After the murder of President Venustiano Carranza, their great protector, and with the ascendancy of Alvaro Obregón to the presidency of the Republic in 1920, Adriana and Dolores were dismissed from their positions. However, for a while, Adriana was able to shoot and process motion pictures in a small homemade laboratory. One of the films they made for the International Petroleum Company was exhibited in 1922 in the United States. In addition, between 1922 and 1929, they made weekly newsreels called Revistas Ehlers, or Ehlers Reviews, moving images of events of the time such as catastrophes, parades, and protests, which they sold directly to exhibitors. I would note this was likely used as stock footage or things seen in travelogues or newsreels. The sisters also continued to market projectors and parts through Casa Ehlers, supplying the fledgling Mexican educational and industrial film industries. The materials that the Ehlers sisters filmed moved from the Ministry of Government to the National Archives, and from there to Cineteca Nacional, where they undoubtedly burned in the 1982 fire. That's the end of the quote. Sadly, as such, I have no footage to show you of the films made by the Ehlers sisters, but they remain groundbreaking and significant Hispanic female filmmakers whom I thought worthy of bringing to your attention nonetheless. In terms of other non-white female silent filmmakers, we have, of course, Marion Wong, the writer-director of 1916's The Curse of Quan Guan, which we discussed and screened clips of in previous classes, and which, as you may recall, I am working with the descendants of Wong's family and the Women Film Pioneers Project of Columbia University to restore the film's missing intertitles. I look forward to the day when that project is finished and I can screen the entire film for a class like this someday, but for now, suffice it to say that this was a feature film created and spearheaded by a Chinese-American woman living in the predominantly Chinese neighborhood of Oakland, California, thus positioning her work as an interesting parallel to that of Esther Ang, another Chinese-American woman who directed films a little later in the 1930s, primarily in San Francisco, California, yet another predominantly Chinese area in the same state. Esther Ang, as we noted in an earlier class, was an out-and-proud Chinese-American lesbian living her life in open defiance of the conservative cultural mores of the 1930s. Interestingly, Esther Ang was also a masculine lesbian like Dorothy Arzner, and like Arzner and perhaps also Mimi Durba, was known to have presented herself in masculine clothing, wearing pants, cross-dressing, if you will, all the time, and was even known to most of her friends as Brother Ha, further illustrating her masculine personal leanings. I actually often wonder whether Esther Ang wasn't in fact a trans man in a time before the culture had any real understanding of that status, especially considering her choice of giving herself a more masculine name. in addition, obviously, to presenting herself in masculine clothing. In her time, she was simply considered a lesbian and apparently accepted as such, with the impressively supportive Chinese American community seeming to have no problem with this, perhaps in part the result of, China's ancient centuries-long cultural history of acceptance of homosexuality, its lack of the sort of demonization of LGBTQ plus issues that we really seem to get mostly from the Abrahamic faiths, which, of course, when China was westernized, sort of ruined that. But if these people were coming from a Chinese culture more informed by ancient tradition, it stands to reason why they would have been so accepting. Perhaps it's also in part the result of a brand of progressive intersectionality that existed in San Francisco back then and continues to exist in that locale to this day. I should also probably note that Esther Ng was apparently a notorious womanizer, a playboy, and a rakish Lothario whose salacious adventures in locales of ill repute outside of the United States, the Women Film Pioneers Project has gossiped about on several occasions in our Zoom meetings. For a glimpse at the work and life of Esther Ng, let's take a brief look at some clips from a documentary about her, 2013's Golden Gate Silver Light, right now.
In 1937, San Francisco-born Esther Ng directed her first feature film in Hong Kong, National Heroine.
伍錦霞咧算係一個拍呢種愛國啊國防電影嘅先驅人物。呢套戲咧都係講女性都要參軍，同男性一齊去保衛國家抗敵㗎。
Although an American citizen, Esther made all of her 10 known features in Chinese, becoming recognized as the first directress of southern China.
I was looking at film reviews from 1941. One caught my eye, which was a review of a film called Golden Gate Girl. And I looked at the credits, and it said directed by Esther Ng. And immediately I realized that I had stumbled across something very unusual because it was a Chinese language film made in San Francisco, directed by a Chinese woman.
即係李海泉喺關影年地喺度做戲啦，咁啊 Bruce Lee 啱啱出世，所以揾佢做喺金門女度扮女仔。
我住緊幾十年啦，唐生。1948
年，小飛喺呢邊拍一套。
哦，拍電影係咪啊？係，響伍錦霞拍嘅，伍錦霞做導演。
Mad Fire, Mad Love opened in San Francisco in 1949. This was Esther's last independent production.
你第一次見到夏哥係幾時？
我第一次見佢1939年。
In 1961, 42-year-old Xu Yinfei and 47-year-old Esther collaborated on what proved to be the last film for both, Murder in New York Chinatown.
香港就係胡鵬導演，New York 就係夏哥導演嘅。
In 1946, when asked by journalist Betty Cornelius if she had been nervous about beginning a career in a medium of which she knew virtually nothing, Esther answered,
"It just came to me. I don't know why. I just went ahead and I wasn't afraid of anything. I am the only one in our family interested in pictures. I wonder why."
Esther Ng is known, as Wikipedia puts it, as a female pioneer who crossed the boundaries of race, language, culture, and gender, a list to which I would also add nation, as she stands very interestingly as one of the first really significant international filmmakers in the world of any race or any gender, thanks to her filmmaking work created for Hong Kong audiences abroad, in addition to her films made for Cantonese-speaking audiences in Chinatowns of America. This puts Esther Ng in a fascinating position and gives her a really unique and remarkable status among the female film pioneers, in that her work happens over a decade after the Soft Purge. Remember, she's working in sound film, is international in its scope and extremely successful and popular within its target demographics, who make up a minority in America and a majority in China, placing her success outside of the American mainstream and thus out of sight and out of mind for most of our written filmic histories. Yet again, we see a significant non-white female filmmaker get left by the wayside of mainstream cinema studies, and yet again, this has to do with who holds power, both in terms of race and in terms of gender, in American society throughout its history. Now, speaking of this issue and the propensity for systems of power to self-perpetuate, I want to make note here that Esther Ng is actually the single latest holdout among the minority women of the classical Hollywood era. Her last film, Too Late for Springtime, was released in 1949, and you may notice from your syllabus that the next most recent film made by a non-white woman on our list for tonight is The Cruz Brothers and Mrs. Malloy from 1980, over 30 years later. This obviously illustrates the existence of innumerable invisible barriers that have historically blocked and prevented both minorities and women, and especially minority women themselves, from entering fields in general in which great success and power is to be had, obviously like that of filmmaking. The Cruz Brothers and Mrs. Malloy is one of the earliest known films after the fall of the classical studio Hollywood era, the fall of the classical studio system, to be made by a black woman, Kathleen Collins, who both wrote and directed the film. This from Milestone Films. At the time of her death from cancer in 1988, Kathleen Collins was just 46 years old, but she was already an internationally renowned playwright, a popular professor at New York's City College, and a successful independent filmmaker. Her first film, The Cruz Brothers and Miss Malloy, is an adaptation of a series of short stories by Henry H. Roth about three young Puerto Rican men whose lives are watched over by their father's ghost. New York's rural Rockland County is an unlikely setting for both the urban-born trio and the magic that they encounter when they meet Miss Malloy, an elderly widow with a house that needs some loving care. The Cruz Brothers and Miss Malloy is a fresh and exciting discovery. Not only is it one of the first films directed by an African-American woman, it is also one of the best celebrations of Puerto Rican culture in the Northeast U.S. And what a complete discovery this film is. The Cruz Brothers and Miss Malloy was never theatrically released, screened once on PBS, and then disappeared. 25 years after her mother's death, Nina Collins rescued the original negative and created a beautiful new digital master of her mother's film. Brothers Victor, Philippe, and Jose are recent graduates of a local Catholic children's school who have decided, counseled by their ghostly guardian, to stay in the quiet area. Although their home is rickety and decorated with old license plates, the brothers revel in their freedom, relative safety, and togetherness. Victor, the oldest and the only brother who can hear his father's voice, keeps a running commentary on their lives by talking into a reel-to-reel tape recorder. When the brothers daringly cross a trestle bridge on the way to play basketball, they attract the attention of Miss Malloy, who follows them in her antique roadster. She salutes the three as fellow survivors and offers them work restoring her Victorian mansion overlooking the Hudson River so that she can host one last party before she dies. With this plot in mind, let's take a look at 1980's The Cruz Brothers and Miss Malloy right now.
Lousy Vanguard's bullets deposited me on the filthy street. But I would not greet death like the usual bullet-riddled loser. I would not stay put and rot in some pauper's grave. Only Victor can see and talk to me.
Hey, Papa. How you doing?
I pushed through the stony soil and cut out to find my sons, to watch over and tail them.
Los que han nacido con mis manos saben la verdad. No hay pobreza ni pena y cierto no hay soledad. mis hermanos.
I'm Edna Malloy. Over there is my house. It was once the grandest residence in town. I want you to restore it for me before I die. I wish to give one last ball there.
Los que han nacido con hermanos saben la verdad. No hay pobreza ni pena y cierto no hay soledad. Y lo que digo no es mentira, ya tú lo verás. Un homenaje a mis hermanos les voy a brindar. Que nada en esta vida, los tiempos buenos atrás y adelante. Son buenas de pares de ojo para guachar. We're brothers.
Another film written and directed by Kathleen Collins is 1982's Losing Ground, yet another movie that touches on the same themes of Puerto Rican people and old Victorian houses that you saw in her previous film, this time centering around a black couple as the main characters. Like the Cruz brothers and Mrs. Malloy, this film was another low-budget independent production that was not given a mainstream theatrical release in its time, echoing the same themes that we've discussed throughout this semester, that the world of mainstream high-budget studio film has been historically closed off and reserved by white men as an exclusively white and male space, exclusively male since the Soft Purge, and unfortunately exclusively white since the dawn of the film industry. As such, let's give Kathleen Collins her due and screen some clips from Losing Ground right now.
I got that book on Janae.
Oh, good. It's the finest analysis of being an outsider I've ever read. I'm glad you found it. There are books that can make a difference in a life.
You're terrific. Your husband appreciates you.
My husband?
Got you in a close-up, Professor. You look just like Pearl McCormick in Scar of Shame, Philadelphia Color Plays, 1927.
Are we supposed to talk?
I don't know.
What's the purpose of the scene?
Something to do with the relationship between the characters, the space, the light.
You have a husband?
Yes. He used to be an abstract painter, and now he only wants to paint people.
I'm a genuine success! Your husband is a genuine block success. Why don't we take a place for the summer? A place upstate where all those Puerto Rican ladies live in those old Victorian houses.
Lifts himself up and puts himself down into someone else. And the very idea, how does that make you feel?
I'm on shaky ground.
Next up on our list, we have Julie Dash, who in 1991 became the first black female film director to have her film Daughters of the Dust obtain a general theatrical release in the United States. Daughters of the Dust, a drama centering around a family in the Gullah community in coastal South Carolina in the early 1900s, is yet another low-budget independent film, but its mainstream release in 1991 illustrates simultaneously how much progress was made by the 90s and also how ridiculously long it took to make it, considering that black women first started directing films, as far as we know, way back in the early 1920s. The film is incredibly polished and powerful despite its very small budget of only $800,000, which by film standards is ludicrously low. To demonstrate the high-quality look and feel of this film and illustrate the impressive and powerful nature of the work of Julie Dash, let's take a look at 1991's Daughters of the Dust right now.
What they got out there anyway, Ola?
Life, child, the beginning of a new life.
Just because we cross over to the mainland, it don't mean we don't love you.
How you can leave the soil? This soil. Because we from the sea. We came here in chains.
When they go down in that water, they ain't never come up. And nobody can walk on water.
I need to know that I can come and hold on to what I come from.
A pass on us. You think you can cross over to the mainland and run away from it?
Never forget who we is and how far we done come.
This from Wikipedia. Despite the critical acclaim, Dash wasn't able to get the financing to release another feature film, going on to work in television. Sound familiar? Remind you maybe a little bit of Catherine Hardwicke's experience? Anyway, the quote continues, Daughters of the Dust would continue to gain accolades for more than 2 decades. It was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress in 2004 as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Its visuals would influence Beyoncé's acclaimed 2016 video album Lemonade, featuring young women on the beach dressed in white gowns as in the movie and gathering in front of an island cabin. Dash also directed the Rosa Parks story, which won several awards, including the NAACP Image Award for Best Television Movie. Dash was nominated for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in the 55th Annual Directors Guild Awards, the first African-American woman nominated in the category of primetime movies made for television. And that is the end of the quote. Perhaps this illustrates our earlier observations, again, from previous classes, to the effect that women and minorities have an easier time breaking into television than they do into the world of mainstream theatrical film. As such, perhaps it is no surprise that Julie Dash and other women of color tend to exist in greater numbers and more prominent positions in the world of television than in film to this day, despite being ultimately and woefully underrepresented in both fields. Next up on our list is another black female filmmaker whose path to success also involved platforms outside of the traditional mainstream theatrical film world, Issa Rae, the writer-producer who first gained acclaim as the creator and star of the web series The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl from 2011 to 2013. This web series led to opportunities for her in television, perhaps most notably the ongoing HBO series Insecure, which started in 2016, which she created and wrote 8 episodes for, in addition to producing, executive producing, and starring in a laundry list of other titles for television, including 2019's A Black Lady Sketch Show and 2020's The Photograph, among other upcoming projects, perhaps most intriguingly a collaboration with Jordan Peele on an upcoming supernatural feature currently entitled Sinkhole. For now, let's take a look at some of the work of writer, producer, show creator, and actress Issa Rae right now.
Am I the only one who pretends I'm in a music video when I'm by myself?
My booty shout, booty shout. Niggas wanna fuck me from behind. Being about his ass, niggas wanna feel up on this booty. They ain't got a chance. I be teasing, cheesing, leaning, playing niggas to the thing. They can't even check me, boo. I'm the motherfucking shit.
Awkward moment. What's the protocol for repeatedly running into someone at a stop sign?
She missed you.
Oh my God.
Hey, I totally didn't even see you.
It's been so long.
I know, right?
No, seriously. What the fuck is it?
Well, I guess I'll see you at work.
Are you supposed to acknowledge them every time? And how many fake laughs are acceptable before it becomes too much?
No, I saw you. Like, I know.
Is it rude to do the dramatic slowdown? Or what about the fake phone call? There's only so long I can hold a fake conversation.
No, I'm told. Yeah. Nope. Yeah.
The stop sign. To any ordinary person, it's a simple sign of direction. But for me, it's the epitome of social misdirection because I'm awkward.
Oh, fuck, another fucking stop sign? Are you shitting me? Are you
We can go together sometime.
You're hilarious. Oh my gosh. Oh, another stop sign. Let's talk at work, right? We are like...
Let me introduce myself. My name is Jay, and I'm awkward and black. Someone once told me those were the two worst things anyone could be. That someone was right. Where do I start? 3 months ago, I shaved my head. My boyfriend, D, the only guy I've ever loved, had just broken up with me.
You know what? I can't do this no more. I can't. I'm not happy. I'm uncomfortable. I don't even think you're happy. I gotta go. I just gotta go.
So I needed a fresh start. And to me, a fresh start meant crying in the mirror, cutting all my hair, getting drunk at the company holiday party, and sleeping with this guy, A, my coworker. 2 days later, D said he wanted to give it another shot.
I gave it some thought, and I want to make this work.
But my new lack of hair made him feel like less of a man, and a week later, he broke up with me.
I feel gay. No homo, but I can't do this no more.
Seriously?
So now, here I am writing violent rap lyrics in my bedroom.
Bitch nigga, you's a liar. I'll set your face on fire. I can give a fuck. It's too Nicki Minaj. Stupid bitch nigga, I hope you drown. That'll turn my frown upside down. I'm a bad bitch. You're a pussy nigga. What the fuck rhymes with pussy nigga? Yes, you deserve to die, and I hope you burn in hell, nigga. Burn in hell, nigga. Burn in hell, nigga.
It's been my secret way of coping with stress since the 6th grade. It gets me through my job, my relationships, and my life. It's odd, but what can I say? I'm awkward.
Go, shawty. It's my birthday, but no one cares because I'm not having a party, because I'm feeling sorry for myself. I just want to be more confident. Brave me. I want to be that person.
I love these Fendi.
I have a problem.
Converse.
I have a problem.
I love how you just don't even care. Few of the others had some concerns.
Are they concerns that they can talk to me about? They're having secret white meetings and they're sending secret white emails.
Girl, you know how these white people are.
Oh, okay. That's it? I spent my entire 20s with a dude that I'm not even gonna end up with. Sometimes I don't know what we're doing. I don't want to just sit on the couch with you for the rest of my life.
You want to break up with me?
I'm not ready to talk about this.
You said I want to talk.
We are not about to be the black couple fighting in Rite Aid. I mean, maybe I'm not satisfied. Lawrence hasn't put it down in a very long time. What the hell? What are you doing here?
I don't know. It's your fantasy. I've always been your what-if guy.
What are you doing? Oh, I was just asking Siri where Malcolm Jamal Warner was born. It's Brooklyn. You know how we were talking about this being the last year of my 20s and how I need to make the most of it? I don't have time to waste. We gonna have some drinks tonight. Ha, ha, ha.
Oh, it's gonna be a strong drink.
I had it all wrong. My man, my job, me. I want to be a better person. I think I like who I'm becoming.
That's backwards.
No, it's not.
So you got titties on your back now?
Following the work of Issa Rae, I wanted to take this opportunity to highlight the work of Michaela Coel, a British woman behind the camera who was brought to my attention by one of your midterm video projects this semester, so good job. I felt I could squeeze her in. Michaela Coel is the writer/show creator of the ongoing BBC series I May Destroy You, a show that explores the question of sexual consent and the distinction between liberation and exploitation in contemporary relationships. Michaela Coel also stars in this series as well as writing it, as she did in her earlier hit series Chewing Gum, which ran from 2015 to 2017. Chewing Gum has actually some qualities in common with Issa Rae's The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl, while I May Destroy You is a powerful example of the kind of groundbreaking work that women behind the camera often do towards the exploration and exposure of serious social issues that need to be addressed and improved in the wider culture. To demonstrate these points, let's take a look at some of the work of Michaela Coel right now.
Alright, look, I hear words, yeah? I hear commands. I see strings. Mum says hand out some flyers, 1,000, cool, that's a string. Mum says speak in tongues, that's a string. Mum says heal the sick, string. Do you know what I do with them strings? Pull them. Like a farmer, milking the 5 penises of a cow. I pull them things and things just happen. It's gonna be fine, guys. Gonna move back home, gonna take my bin back, gonna unpack that. Oh, Ola, flyer. Hey. Nice piercings, got that for fashion, yeah? Jesus got his piercings while he was busy dying for you. Don't you feel bad?
Fuck off.
Cool. How many of us shifted nappies?
You gave me one 3 hours ago, so 1.
Cool. Oh, Connor.
Yes.
Tracy?
You right?
You right? All right. Yeah?
I've never done that before.
That's... Yeah. Oh. Emma, better go. See you later.
Hey, Mr. Keys. Robalimer, new Mismer Gog. Fucking renegade Honda Civic. Yes, Honda Civic. Mercedes-Benz. Nissan Micra. You're homeless. I'm so happy about it.
I beg you, Keith. Keith. I beg you, take the flyer.
You gotta shake it.
Okay. Oh! Jesus loved you.
Damn. Only Jesus?
I don't know, maybe your friends and family loved you
That's
too.
just a joke. I was joking by way of flirting.
Ugh, hetero.
Anyway, back to fly, yes. Soul needs saving.
Do you want to take some for your friends?
As long as that's not all I'm taking from you.
Huh?
He wants your number.
I'm Ash, by the way.
You're very handsome.
Oh, well, thank you.
Don't say thank you. It's not good, it's not bad. I'm just saying. You got a job?
Yeah.
Have you had it for more than 1 week?
3 years, yeah.
To live with your mum?
No, I'm sort of proud to say that I own my own penthouse apartment.
Are you dumb or are you smart?
Well, that's a subjective
Did
question.
you finish year 11?
I've got a degree in finance.
Cool. Call my phone. Call my phone. 0770
Yeah.
900 305.
Doing it.
That was easy. Kind of replaced me. I replaced him. String. End the call. Why are you still calling the phone? So drop call. Drop call. End the call, man. Thanks, God. This is it. Flyers for your friends and your family. Handed out all my flyers. Replace my boyfriend. Handed out all my flyers. Replace my boyfriend.
It's hard to stop it when it starts off so small. Steve's like that.
Remember all aggressors.
Oh, it's Bob, sorry. I took Bob aside. I said, can you stop? Barely finished speaking before he's looking all horrified, saying he'll never talk to me again because it's safer. Looking at me like I'm crazy.
Well, Bob probably does think you're crazy. He thinks this is all a little uncalled for and this personal space thing is all going a bit too far. And he's very confident in his view because he's gone exploring to see for himself what boundaries and violations these women might be banging on about because Bob's thorough. And on these explorations, Bob found the line that separated him from everything else. Rather than crossing it, he tiptoed on it. And he experienced this feeling of being on the boundary, on the border, right on the line of being neither in one place or another, and saw how in this grey area, where nothing was quite clear, no one could be clear. We can't articulate. We fuddle our words. We couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was he did that we felt was so wrong. So yeah, Bob thinks you're crazy. Yeah, he thinks he's the smartest man in the room who knoweth all things because Bob has observed the detail. We have to start observing Bob. Telling him. We do see the detail. We see you, Bob. And if we see you, it means we are right there with you, tiptoeing in line, right behind you. And in that place, where rules, clarity, law, and separation cease to exist, we will show you exactly what we mean by violation.
Next up on our list is Ava DuVernay, the first Black woman ever to win the directing award in the U.S. dramatic competition at the Sundance Film Festival with her 2012 film Middle of Nowhere. Middle of Nowhere is yet again another low-budget independent film. See a pattern here? Further illustrating, the fact that women of color are, of course, systemically kept out of mainstream high-budget studio filmmaking, perhaps even more so than white women are. I think clearly even more so. But Ava DuVernay's recognition for this film thankfully led to more creative opportunities for her, perhaps most notably 2014's Selma, another independent film in which DuVernay, served as both director and executive producer, this film being about the historic civil rights march led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma, Alabama, and her other Netflix series, 2019's When They See Us, which Ava DuVernay wrote, directed, and produced, or at this point you might even just say auteured, among many other ongoing projects. When They See Us is a harrowing and powerful dramatization of the real-life experience of the so-called Central Park Five, a group of 5 young black men who were racially profiled, falsely accused, and wrongly imprisoned for the rape and murder of a Central Park jogger in 1989. The series follows their stories from the initial false accusation all the way through their decades-long jail time, up to their ultimate exoneration and eventual $44 million settlement against the city and state governments of New York for malicious prosecution, racial discrimination, and emotional distress. Obviously, this story needs and deserves a mainstream platform in general, but especially right now when, obviously, the violence of our entrenched systems of systemic racism is being laid bare on a daily basis and becoming clearer than ever to people of all walks of life, illustrating powerfully and inarguably how long this sort of injustice has been being perpetrated against black communities throughout American history and on into the present day. Similar themes come out in DuVernay's ongoing series Queen Sugar, which she wrote and created for the Oprah Winfrey Network, as well as in many other instances of her work. To illustrate these ideas, let's take a look at some of the work of Ava DuVernay right now.
He's got supporters. Detroit, New York, Los Angeles, inciting large-scale arrests and sympathy marches.
I'm very aware of that, Mr. Hoover. What I do know is he's nonviolent. What I need to know right now, what's Martin Luther King about to do next?
Mr. President, Dr. King is here.
Mr. President, in the South, there have been thousands of racially motivated murders.
We need your help, Dr. King. This thing's just gonna have to wait. It cannot wait. You got one big issue, I got 101.
Selma it is.
Here is the next great battle.
Selma's the place, and they ready.
Dr. King!
I tell you, that white boy can hit.
You will not tolerate agitators attempting to orchestrate a disturbance in this state.
It is unacceptable that they use their power to keep us voiceless. Those that have gone before us say no more.
People actually say they're gonna kill our children. They're trying to get inside of your head.
What happens when a man stands up, says enough is enough? We built the path as we came, rock by rock. His sail is probably bugged. It probably is.
We must march. We must stand up.
You march those people into rural Alabama, it's gotta be open season.
May I have a word?
There's no word to be had.
The people
70 million people watching. These pictures are going around the world.
We must make a massive demonstration. White, black, and otherwise. Come to Selma.
I heard about the attack of innocent people. I couldn't just stand by.
Looks like an army out there.
This revolution goes on and on. This revolution goes on and on. Mine eyes have seen the glory, glory, glory. Hallelujah.
What happens when a man stands up, says enough is enough?
Is my mom here?
It's just us. You and us. Who you were in the park with?
I don't know names. I just got lost.
Where did you see the lady?
One lady.
The female jogger was severely beaten and raped. Every black male who was in the park last night is a suspect. I need all of them.
What's going on with my son?
Your son was involved in a rape in Central Park.
No,
Wait a minute. Wait a second.
They saw you rape the lady. I didn't see a lady or hit anyone.
I didn't see any lady.
Kevin.
I didn't see any lady.
I want to see my son right now. Right now.
Whatever they said I did, I didn't.
Zoning on the road.
Nothing in these boys' state matches the central facts of the crime. All we need is for one to tie this whole thing together.
These tapes are not as clean as the state would have you believe.
There is injustice happening here.
There is not one shred of evidence.
Imagine the frenzy of these teenagers.
Ripping off her
They
clothes.
are innocent of these
They
crimes.
are guilty.
Why are they doing us like this?
What other way they ever do us?
And I haven't looked back.
I've been having these dreams.
Since I
I keep hearing these footsteps. And they coming closer and closer. That's me. Coming to bring you home.
They said if I went along with it, that I could go home, and that's all I wanted.
The police will do anything. Lie on us, they will lock us up, they will kill us.
This is my life.
I don't think we should admit to something that we didn't do. Okay, we keep fighting.
The work of Ava DuVernay takes us now very much into the present era, where the work of non-white female filmmakers admittedly begins to become more prevalent, though I should note women of color still remain visibly absent from the realms of mainstream high-budget studio filmmaking, despite the obvious quality, critical acclaim, and awards that films made by these women have earned, not to mention the fact that they have been able to do all of this, typically on such ridiculously low budgets. It goes to illustrate yet again the same themes that we've been seeing all semester. The fact that women of color, like the white women whom we've studied, are often excellent filmmakers because guess what? Filmmaking is as much a racially neutral activity as it is a gender neutral one. Duh. The potential to possess great filmic talent is a human universality. It's not just given to one kind of person. Anyone can have talent. This is true of basically every existing type of artistic ability. And if the film industry were indeed the meritocracy of talent that it so often pretends to be, and if racism and sexism were not factors in the hiring decisions of the predominantly white male film studio executives, we would of course be seeing a lot more women of color directing high-budget mainstream feature films in Hollywood studios. Interestingly, again, we see a recurrence of the theme of women on a production begetting more women in other roles behind the camera in the story of Ava DuVernay, and specifically women of color begetting more other women of color behind the camera, with examples like Queen Sugar, executive produced by Oprah Winfrey, a black woman hiring another black woman to write and create a show for the network that she herself owns. This again illustrates the power and potential of female friendships and connections towards bringing more women into the film and television industries, while simultaneously revealing that the same functions are clearly in play when it comes to people of color, and even more specifically women of color, hiring people who they relate to, who look like them in positions of authority and power in projects led by other women of color. In short, this is yet another demonstration of the need for more non-white women in major roles in mainstream American film studios, as it would doubtless lead to more women of color in the film industry in general. It bears mentioning additionally that with things like the independent film circuit and networks like OWN, the Oprah Winfrey Network, we are seeing a sort of modern day iteration of the historically segregated filmic landscape in American popular entertainment, a subject which I will be exploring further in my class on the history of African American cinema next semester, so check it out in your course catalog if you're interested. While it's great that there are platforms and networks owned by Black celebrities and creators, of course, the fact remains, however, that these are very much, unfortunately, separate from the predominantly white-controlled realm of mainstream big-budget American corporate filmmaking. This, in fact, is a vestigial trace of our nation's historically segregated entertainment spaces that has had the unfortunate effect of perpetuating the exclusion of people of color of both genders from high positions in the realm of mainstream filmmaking. What we need, of course, is a more racially integrated filmic landscape in the mainstream as well as in the margins. Not just on TV and in independent film, but also from major big-budget Hollywood film releases. And obviously, this, goes for concerns of gender integration as well as race. This is something long overdue, and let's press them on the internet to make it happen. An outlier, perhaps, from these concerns is Rungano Nyoni, the Zambian-born female writer-director of 2017's I Am Not a Witch, an award-winning film about a little girl arbitrarily accused of witchcraft. While Rungano Nyoni was raised in Wales, her most prominent work was filmed in her native Zambia, placing her in a category somewhat akin to that of Etsuko Egawa and Makiko Futaki, a black woman who represents a part of the majority culture in the world where her films are made and set. While non-white filmmakers from foreign countries where non-white races are in the majority are seldom celebrated in the United States, it bears repeating and remembering that people of color are very much the norm, very much the empowered filmmaking majority in countries with non-white majority populations. Duh. It feels perhaps a little noticeable that when a foreign director wins international acclaim in the United States, they are more often than not white Europeans, in spite of the fact that people of color, and for our purposes here, especially women of color, often contribute significant work to the international filmmaking scene. To illustrate all this, let's take a look at the work of Rungano Nyoni with 2017's I Am Not a Witch right now.
Nindo shumwana oyo tatushibo kwafuma alulumba vyomungulu.
Allow me to introduce to you our new member of the community. Ulikaloshkandiwe. Mina nitfala bomba nomba. Wonsai. Umozi pali wa maringara imwendi anapa. So zafunsa manakambira paja zafunsa. Askulu. Zimiani mafoni hayo. Ni mukoti muno, don't do that.
Ine nalinga iwelo nali mwachini. Nale ichindika. So na wonga wakula ichindika oleshita fyonse fefe wakweba na wonga banga ine. Lembe ukanchira no kunchira. Yala loka. Wewe, mama.
Is that it? Exactly when is it gonna rain?
Shula, how are you settling into your new life?
Would you like to take a picture with me? Look at the camera.
No.
I'll send it to you.
What if she's actually just a child?
back a bit into our earlier discussion of Oprah as a black female executive producer of filmic projects, and throwing even further back to our lesson on producers with Ginger Brown's comment to the effect that people who are already celebrities for other reasons in front of the camera often have an easier time obtaining desirable roles behind the camera. Next up on our list, we have Octavia Spencer, the acclaimed actress who is also the executive producer of 2013's Fruitvale Station and 2018's Green Book. Let's take a look at some clips from both of these films right now.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Shots fired at Fruitvale.
We're trying to get home. What is going on?
Next stop, Fruitvale Station.
You're gonna go to Frisco, right? See the fireworks?
Yeah. You ain't gonna say bye?
Bye.
Love you too.
Everything's changing around me, and I wanna change.
Hey, what's up, girl?
It's now or never.
I'm trying to get back on my feet. I really need this job. I hired somebody else.
I feel different today.
What'd you do today?
I don't know what else to say.
I can start over fresh, but it ain't working out.
It's now or never.
I'm scared. I hear guns.
Don't just firecrackers. You're safe inside.
What about you, Daddy?
We'll be back before you wake up. I'm gonna be fine.
You guys got plans for the night?
I meet up with the fellas, head out to the city.
Why don't you take the train out there? That way you guys can hang out and not have to worry about anything.
Hey, Oscar. How are you?
I'm good. Happy New Year.
Happy New
Oscar?
Year.
Oscar from Pharmacia?
Get off the train now! Put that phone in it.
What do you got? Are you still on the train?
We still at Fruitvale.
Why can't you tell me what is going on? What is the problem? What did you do? Oh my God.
Good, I'm good. We're gonna be good. We're gonna be good.
It's now or never. It's now or never.
Yeah. Some guy called over here, a doctor. He's looking for a driver. You interested?
I am not a medical doctor. I'm a musician. I'm about to embark on a concert tour in the Deep South. What other experience do you have?
Public relations.
Do you foresee any issues in working for a black man?
You in the Deep South, there's gonna be problems.
Promise me you're gonna write me a letter.
I promise. Tell me that don't smell good.
I've never had fried chicken in my life.
You people love the fried chicken.
You have a very narrow assessment of me, Tony.
Yeah, right? I'm good.
We will be interacting with some of the wealthiest people in the country. It is my feeling that your diction could use some finessing.
But why you break my balls?
Because you can do better, Mr. Vallelonga.
Dear Dolores.
I saw Dr. Shirley play the piano. He's like a genius, I think.
Come on, take it easy.
I prefer not to get grease on my blanket.
Ooh, I'm gonna get grease on my blanket.
This gentleman says that I'm not permitted to dine here.
I'm afraid not. How does he smile and shake their hands like that?
Because it takes courage to change people's hearts. What are you doing?
A letter.
May I? Dear Dolores, sometimes you remind me of a house. You know this is pathetic, right? Put this down. The distance between us is breaking my spirit. Falling in love with you
Was the easiest thing I have ever done. P.S. Kiss the kids.
That's like clanging a cowbell at the end of Shostakovich's 7.
That's good.
It's perfect, Tony.
Come on, get out now.
You never win with violence. You only win when you maintain your dignity.
You don't know your own people. You, Mr. Big Shot, doing concerts for rich people.
So if I'm not black enough, and if I'm not white enough, then tell me, Tony, what am I? Won't you call me?
Anyone can sound like Beethoven. But your music, what you do, only you can do that.
What do we do about the bones?
We do this.
Pick it up, Tony.
Squirrels would have ate it anyway.
Pick it up.
Your mother's ass. Piece of shit. How's this guy doing? Son of a bitch. License and papers. Am I glad to see you? We had to turn off the main road and now we're lost. Step out of the car. What'd I do? Out of the car. Why are you on this road? I told you, we had to make a detour. We got lost. Why are you driving him? He's my boss. He can't be out here at night. It's a sundown town. What's that? Get him out of the car and check his ID. Come on, it's pouring rain.
Sir, I can just get it right here to the window.
Get him out of the car.
Come on, get out now. Get out now. Get out. Got ID?
How you say this last name? Bellalonga.
Hey, what kind of name is that?
It's Italian.
Oh. Oh, I see. That's why you driving him around. You half a nigger yourself. Hands in the air! Now! Now!
So perhaps by now you've noticed the obvious pattern that bears mentioning here. As we have discussed in previous lessons, female filmmakers tend to make highly progressive films that highlight social issues and injustices and often contain larger messages that lobby for change and improvements to the status quo. Perhaps you've noticed the visible and recurring pattern within a lot of the filmic work of Black women screened here tonight that deal with the specific issues of racial injustice, police brutality, racial profiling, and the demonization and brutalization of innocent Black people committed by police and other figures of white authority. This, I think, is certainly a common theme shared among many of the films of Black female creators that we have highlighted here so far. And the next one up on our list, Kasi Lemmons, is no exception. Like Octavia Spencer, Kasi Lemmons is perhaps best known as an actress, particularly for her roles in films like Silence of the Lambs and Candyman, though her more recent filmic work has taken place behind the camera, with directorial credits for the Marvel TV series Luke Cage, and perhaps most notably, the feature film Harriet from 2019, a long overdue Harriet Tubman biopic, which Lemmons co-wrote as well as directing. Let's take a look at 2019's Harriet right now.
There's not much time. You got to be miles away from here before dawn. Where is she? Follow that North Star. If there are no stars, just follow the river. Listen for them. Fear is your enemy. Whoa. Easy now.
I'm gonna be free or die.
I don't know if you know how extraordinary this is, but you have made it 100 miles to freedom all by yourself. Would you like to pick a new name to mark your freedom?
Harriet Tubman. You are welcome here anytime.
If I'm free, my family should be too. I made up my mind, I'm going back.
You're confident, composed. When trouble comes, you'll be ready.
Papers. Says here you're 5.5 feet tall. You ain't more than 5 feet.
Must have won my high boots that day.
Why you back here? It ain't safe.
I come to get you. Bring all of you to freedom.
Do you know what would happen if you got caught? You got lucky, Harriet.
I made it this far on my own, so don't you tell me what I can't do.
Harriet, welcome to the Underground Railroad. Everybody, everywhere is looking for you.
God don't mean people to own people. Find this thief and burn her at the stake.
Harriet!
I would give every last drop of blood in my veins until this monster called slavery is dead. Ready?
This from a CNN Entertainment article from 2019. In a recent Q&A, screenwriter Gregory Allen Howard opened up about the 26-year journey to getting the Harriet biopic to the big screen. At the time the effort started, he said, Hollywood was not the same. I wanted to turn Harriet Tubman's life, which I'd studied in college, into an action-adventure movie. The climate in Hollywood, however, was very different back then, Howard said. I was told how one studio head said in a meeting, "This script is fantastic. Let's get Julia Roberts to play Harriet Tubman." Howard said when someone suggested that Roberts could not play the role, the executive responded, "It was so long ago, no one is going to know the difference." And that's the end of the quote. It has been an uphill battle getting women of color in front of the camera as well as behind it in the world of mainstream filmmaking, a battle which continues on to the present day. Though I feel that is a particularly ludicrous instance of it. Anyway, next up we have the first documentary film and the only film by a Native person on our list for tonight, Merida, How Mum Decolonized the Screen, a filmic reflection on the work of female documentary filmmaker and New Zealand Maori Native activist Merida Mita as presented by her adult children. Let's take a look at 2019's Merida, How Mum Decolonized the Screen right now.
My mother once said, what you see when you look at an archival film are resurrections taking place.
I call them home movies because almost every project that Mum worked on, she had us kids working on it too.
The family is the major thing in my life that has given me the courage to be the kind of person that I am.
Mum was right there filming all of this, just indiscriminate violence. At that time I was really scared for Mum's safety.
I've seen a lot of things. I've seen unparalleled horror in terms of physical suffering. But the fact is, when you have children, you have an investment in the future, and so you come out fighting again.
This boy called me names. He told me to go back to my own country.
I had friends saying, oh, my parents told me we're not allowed to play with you anymore because of what my mother was doing.
Why are you doing it? Why don't you just stop?
For Indigenous cinema, it really does trace back to Merida.
She is the grandmother of Indigenous cinema.
It was about changing history. It was about changing the way Native people, Maori people were perceived by the rest of the world.
And does that contrast with the way you feel you're seen in New Zealand?
Very much so. I don't think people regard me as a very valuable resource here as much as they regard me as a nuisance.
She reminded me that my point of difference in filmmaking is trying to maybe take a serious situation and inject it with a lot of irreverence or humour.
Once the work shows that you're capable of doing something, then all the other prejudices about race and sex may perhaps fall away.
You know, as the adult looking back, if I had to do it 10 times over, I would do it.
I would do it all again with her.
So that's a little bit of information to start out Hippie's research.
I take a special notice of the moment in this film when the little boy describes the experience of being told to go back to his own country when he is a native Maori person and New Zealand is his own country, far more so than any European colonist-descended person can claim. That's legitimately the equivalent of telling a Native American person to go back to their own country. Hello, this is their country. Oh, colonialism. But while we're on the subject of documentary film, however, I would be remiss if I did not bring up the work of Zora Neale Hurston, the black female author, anthropologist, and filmmaker who documented various aspects of the lives and work of black Americans in the southern United States in the early 1900s. I would call Hurston's films more documents than documentaries, as they are largely composed of raw footage and feature disjointed raw narration and singing that does not really sync with the visuals, but they remain significant documents nonetheless, and many of her anthropological films are preserved in the Library of Congress as well. Next up on our list is Lulu Wang, the writer-director of 2019's The Farewell. The Farewell is yet another independent film with a relatively low by Hollywood standards budget of only $3 million that has won multiple awards and critical acclaim on the International Film Festival circuit. By now, perhaps this too can be held up as a pattern that most of the films on our screening list for tonight have fallen into, being highly compelling and powerful films made by women of color that, despite winning multiple awards and attaining great international acclaim, noticeably do not seem to lead to opportunities for their creators in the realm of the white-controlled patriarchal filmic world of big-budget mainstream Hollywood film. Oh, surprise, surprise, it's the same pattern that we've basically been seeing all semester. The Farewell calls back in interesting ways to the films of Esther Ng and Marion Wong, Chinese-American women who made films explicitly for Chinese-American audiences, in the case of Marion Wong using English intertitles, and in the case of Esther Ng recording sound films in the Cantonese dialect. This linguistic mix of Chinese and English is reflected in The Farewell, a film created for an English-speaking mainstream despite clearly having a Chinese-American audience in mind. To illustrate these points, let's take a look at Lulu Wang's directorial work with 2019's The Farewell right now.
What's wrong, Dad? Please tell me.
Your Nan is dying.
She doesn't know, so you can't say anything. The family thinks it's better not to tell her.
Why is that better?
Chinese people have saying, when people get cancer, they die. We have to go to China.
Wedding is an excuse so everyone can see her.
He's my only cousin. Did you think I should be there?
You can't hide your emotions. If you go, Nan will find out right away.
Billy 呀，咋啦？咋不说话呢？今天人多齐呀，好久没这么聚了，奶奶就等着这一天呐。来，大口咬，哇，哈哈哈哈哈！
你觉得我们应该告诉奶奶吗？
太痛苦了吧？
如果她想说再见呢？
你告诉她就毁了她美好的心情，你说对吧？
搭到她的肩膀上。你说我都怀疑我又不在，他俩在卧室能干啥呀？
Shouldn't we tell her? Isn't it wrong to lie?
It's a good lie. Most families in China would choose not to tell her.
你们说的啥呀？
她在英国学习，所以她会说英文。
结婚了吗？
妈。She's dying. Can you be a little more sensitive?
What do you want from me? To scream and cry like you?
因为你把生命看成是个体的，这正是西方和东方的文化差异问题。东方人是把生命看作是集体的家庭。
I want to believe that is a good thing.
因为生活呀，不光是你去做什么，更是你如何去做。傻孩子！好多了，好多了，好多了，再来点气儿，再来点气儿。
Nearing the end of our list of minority women for tonight, we have Cathy Yan, the director of the film Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn from earlier this year. As far as I could tell from my research for this class tonight, with this film, from this year, Cathy Yan became the first non-white woman in all of film history to direct a big-budget major motion picture from a mainstream Hollywood studio. I hope I'm missing someone here. I feel like this can't possibly be right, but as far as I was able to research, it appears to be correct. To my knowledge, no other non-white female filmmaker was ever hired to direct a major Hollywood release. Defined for our purposes here, I should note, as a film with a budget over $20 million released by a major motion picture studio. The first part of your hidden assignment for tonight is to email me and let me know if I'm missing someone you know about. If I'm wrong, or if you don't have any clue or don't know of anyone who did this any earlier than Cathy Yan while being a non-white woman, that's fine. Just let me know. So pause the video and go email me with this information right now. Okay, you did it. Good job. So, that said, so far as I know, at the moment of this recording, out of over a century of Hollywood filmmaking history, it wasn't until this year in 2020 that a woman of color was hired to direct a major big-budget Hollywood motion picture. But perhaps it's worth pointing out that it also wasn't until this year, until a few days ago in fact, that a woman of color was ever elected by the American people to become Vice President of the United States. Thank God we did it, don't get me wrong, and it's certainly better late than never. But the takeaway here, in my view, is basically that while we've come a long way, we really ought to stop patting ourselves on the back and congratulating ourselves for how progressive our culture has become over the last few years. This progress is, of course, long overdue and has come at ridiculously great expense. And as a culture, it feels, to me at least, that we owe ourselves and the worthy and talented women of color among us to do much better than this. Again, we need to start seeing women, minorities, and of course minority women as human beings and equals. And unless and until the most powerful gatekeepers among our population are able to do this, we will continue to fall short of our human potential in every category, every field, and every conceivable venue that people of color, women, and other minorities are needlessly kept out of because of racial and gender and other kinds of prejudice, and of course the systems of power that keep perpetuating it. Speaking of racial and gender prejudice, this provides a smooth transition from this question into our final lesson for this class, and originally your separate 14th and final class video, Questioning the Gender Barrier, an exploration of trans women and trans filmmakers whose very existence challenges the gender barrier as we know it. The ultimate thesis of this particular lesson is, as perhaps you've already guessed, the idea that if transgender people exist, which it is demonstrably true and even scientifically provable that they in fact do, again, if trans people exist, then what the hell are we doing having gender prejudice in this world at all? If the argument behind privileging the hiring of men behind the camera at the expense of women has theoretically got something to do with the inherent superiority of men, an idea which I hope you understand by now has been thoroughly debunked, then how on earth can we negotiate this belief in a world where people can change their gender, can and do change their gender? If a person who is biologically male at birth and assigned the male sex later grows up to recognize that their internal psychological gender is actually female, or vice versa, then where does this place such a person in our imagined belief about their likelihood to be a talented filmmaker? And while we're at it, is that one of the stupidest questions that you've ever been asked? I hope it is. And, you know, if it is, maybe that's because sexism is obviously inherently stupid, and trans people are themselves living proof of this fact. One of your readings for this class was an article about The Matrix, whose writer-director duo, Lily and Lana Wachowski, are trans women who have now officially confirmed that The Matrix is indeed a trans narrative. My best friend, who is also trans, was saying this for years, actually. I believe even before the Wachowski sisters were out of the closet, pointing to the themes of leading a secret, submerged double life, breaking through to a new understanding of yourself, specifically Neo renaming himself with only the villains using his dead name, and of course the famous red pill scene, which, it's important to note, was literally what estrogen hormone pills being prescribed to trans women looked like at the time that the film was made. While there have been online naysaying, troll people arguing somewhat ludicrously against the Wachowski sisters' own discussion of their own film's meaning, and obviously its status as a trans narrative, suffice it to say that these people are just plain missing the point. Yes, the Wachowski sisters might have looked male outwardly at the time the film was made, but they have been trans women their whole lives, whether they were out to themselves at the time or not. Being trans or having gender dysphoria isn't something that just comes upon you suddenly. It's basically just like being gay or being female or being black or whatever else you may be. It's something that, is a part of you your whole life, whether you were raised to know it or not, whether the culture around you recognized its existence or not. I can vouch for it because I'm actually in that boat too. I grew up with gender dysphoria, but didn't learn the words gender dysphoria until I was over 30. My gender dysphoria is relatively mild. I don't want to be male, so I don't identify as trans. And though I do usually consider myself a female-leaning and female-identifying person, I have, shall we say, a complicated relationship with my gender, feeling myself to be much more gender-neutral than I outwardly appear. But I was raised in a cis-het normative culture that assumed that I was cis-het too, and failed me in terms of the complete and total omission of any discussion of the very existence of transgender and gender dysphoric people throughout my entire education, even into adulthood. This was true for my best friend too. We both went to the same high school. We were educated in the same health classes that totally omitted mention of these things, these issues that applied to us so deeply and so personally, to the point where both of us had to learn about who and what we are, how to put what we had always been feeling about ourselves down into words from articles on the internet. All of the creative work that I've ever done in my life, all the art, filmmaking, animation, writing, comics, even the creation of this very class, every aspect of how I think and feel, how I meet the world, basically all the elements that make me up as a person, that make up who I am, all of this has been deeply informed by my status as a gender dysphoric person, a person who does not see myself as truly belonging to any one gender, and who continually finds myself genuinely surprised and confused whenever I run into the sorts of barriers that are typically imposed upon and used to exclude and belittle women. I think, very much like a man might feel to be treated this way. It's weird, incorrect, surprising, and confusing, but not in the same way that it would probably be for a cis-het woman, not in a way that hits home quite right. It doesn't hurt me the same way it might hurt a cis-het woman to experience gender discrimination, because I feel it to be obviously inapplicable to me. It bounces off to me. It's weirdly irrelevant and very, very stupid. It's almost like if someone called me the N-word or something, or used some racial slur that just doesn't apply, and therefore, comes off as more confusing, awkward, maybe a little funny, but ultimately at worst more annoying than directly hurtful in a deep way to me as a person. I believe it is this very perspective that has enabled me to deconstruct the fallacies inherent within gender prejudices without feeling the sort of sting of immediacy that might affect a cis-het woman. In a way, it's enabled me to keep a level head throughout these sort of discussions, to cock an eyebrow at the mistaken treatment rather than feel genuinely belittled by it. And for that perspective, I am very grateful. It's been a huge advantage to me in my life, and I recognize it in a strange sort of a way as a kind of secret privilege that I have. And of course, all of this was true of me long before I learned that gender dysphoria was even a thing. The realities of who and what we are are integral to our status as human beings, deep core parts of our hearts and souls, whether we have the language to describe them or not. It's analogous, I think, to something, you know, like being the unknown orphan baby of two great musicians brought up in a world without music. The tendency towards this aspect of yourself would break through no matter what, whether you knew that it was called music or not, whether you were educated to recognize it or not, it would be there. It would always be a part of you. So understanding this and incorporating this understanding into our studies, let's take a look at the submerged trans narratives that boil powerfully under the surface of The Matrix from 1999, right now.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. What truth? That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. Follow me.
Now, you may notice that the year 1999 is rather late in film history to be pointing to the first trans women, perhaps the first transgender people in general, to make feature films. I think it should also be noted, of course, that the Wachowski sisters, entering the film industry and being understood as male, probably had significant advantages that they wouldn't have had they been trans women from the start, or had they just been women of any kind at the start, and that yes, their male privilege is part of what enabled them to have this platform. But that said, they were sort of covert agents of transness, and you gotta salute them for what they've done. Anyway, the interesting phenomenon that I want to point out here is, of course, the fact that, like with my own experience, lacking the language to self-identify as trans or gender dysphoric, trans people in past eras would have gone largely unrecognized and therefore unrecorded, leaving only hints and traces behind them in the historical narrative. Additionally, if they were successful enough at passing for the gender that they saw themselves as, the past would have simply misrecorded transgender filmmakers as cisgendered. For all we know, there could have been loads of trans people in the film industry all throughout its history. Anyone you've studied in any of your film history classes might have been trans and passing for cis. Who knows? But if they were there at a time when this would have been neither accepted nor understood, they would have likely kept this as a closely guarded secret that has so far gone unrevealed and unrecorded by scholars and historians up to the present day. Additionally, though we may never know for certain one way or the other, I feel like there is fairly significant evidence that Esther Ng and perhaps also Dorothy Arzner could well have been trans men living in a time when this was unknown and inaccurately labeled as being a lesbian. In other words, while both identified as butch masculine lesbians in their time, there was no notion of the concept of being transgender ever presented to them in their lives, and unlike my best friend and me, they didn't have the internet and the benefit of modern science on gender studies or the narratives of other trans and gender dysphoric people coming out via online platforms to explain to them what they have always been feeling all along. Or maybe they were just both butch lesbians, we may never know. But suffice it to say that they both went far out of their ways to present themselves as so very masculine that even today it's easy to misgender them at a glance in photographs. And in the case of Esther Ng, her chosen name of Brother Ha seems to point in the direction of a clear male chosen identity preferred by a person who seems to have questioned and perhaps rather strongly challenged the gender barrier in her time. So for all we know, the first trans filmmaker could have been Esther Ng, or should I say, Brother Ha himself. Now I want to jump ahead briefly to the Netflix documentary film Disclosure, which came out earlier this year, and which was executive produced, of course, by Black trans actress and activist Laverne Cox of Orange is the New Black fame. Disclosure is a fabulous documentary, even if it does admittedly play a little fast and loose with blurring the lines between transgender and drag performance, but regardless, the film nonetheless illustrates the many ways in which trans people have been misportrayed by media created by non-trans filmmakers, often casting trans people as all sorts of unflattering and unrealistic characters that run the gamut from dangerous psychopaths to prostitutes to murder victims and a whole slew of other really unflattering things in ways that, you know, are really just a ludicrous far cry from the reality and which demonstrate the need for more trans voices in the filmmaking world so that trans people can tell their own stories and set the record straight. To this end, let's take a look at the trailer to Disclosure right now.
I can't even tell you how many times I've been in public space, particularly early in my transition, when I would walk into a subway car and people would just burst into laughter. And I think people are been trained to have that reaction. According to a study from GLAAD, 80% of Americans don't actually personally know someone who is transgender. So most of the information that Americans get about who transgender people are, what our lives are and are about, comes from the media.
We've been around since there was footage. You just have to look for us.
Can we all just talk about D.W. Griffith for a minute? Not only is he incredibly racist, but he turned gender non-conforming people into the joke.
So it's like you can't have like queer trans people and blackness in the same space at the same time. So what's it say about my queer trans black ass?
They've died so many times they can't even count on camera.
I've been a prostitute, prostitute 1, prostitute 2, call girl, hooker, you know?
The Crying Game created a ripple effect.
You are a trans person who existed, made people physically ill. Was the way in which my favorite movie as a child ended.
There are lots of ugly things about our history, but I think we have to know them.
I have been beaten. I have been thrown in jail for gay liberation, and you all treat me this way?
There is a one-word solution to almost all the problems in trans media. We just need more. And that way, the occasional clumsy representation wouldn't matter as much because it wouldn't be all that there is.
You see a fierceness that's coming up now. That's because we ain't got nothing to lose.
These are my sisters up here, but the struggle is real.
The ways in which trans people have been represented have suggested that we're mentally ill, that we don't exist. And yet here we are, and we've always been here.
One more thing I'd like to say about Disclosure. The documentary included clips of a wide variety of mainstream theatrical films when I saw it, including clips from 1992's The Crying Game and 2009's The Hangover, neither of which I admit I have ever seen, either in their entirety or in clips, before watching Disclosure. And the thing that I noticed about these two films immediately when I was watching Disclosure, and a fact that, you know, the documentary doesn't even touch on, but nevertheless makes absolutely clear with the inclusion of clips from these films, is that they contain full frontal nudity that straight up just showed trans women's genitalia connected to and in context of their bodies, not disembodied as the MPAA guidelines require. And yet, these films were merely rated R, not NC-17. This blew my mind. Because it illustrates how the rule against showing penises on R-rated films exists explicitly and exclusively to protect the dignity of cisgendered men. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, when it's trans women's penises being shown, this is suddenly okay with the MPAA, and they give the film an R rating rather than a rating of NC-17. This clearly and obviously illustrates that the rule isn't actually about penises at all. It isn't really about that particular sex organ, nor is it the result of any sort of belief that penises are somehow too obscene to be shown on film or anything of that nature. As demonstrated by these films, the rule is merely there to give cisgendered men an advantage in dignity over both cisgender and transgender women, neither of whom apparently have any body parts that the MPAA considers too sacred to appear in an R-rated film. If penises themselves were really the problem, we wouldn't be seeing so much full frontal nudity from trans women in films, period. If penises are not really the problem, then we really ought to be seeing a whole lot more of them on cisgender male bodies than we currently do in film, so as to balance out the gendered nudity bias that evidently allows both cisgender and transgender women to appear totally naked on the screen all the time. It's clear to me that the issue has a lot more again to do with who holds power in a society and who wants to protect the most vulnerable part of their own bodies from humiliation while sparing no thought for the humiliation of cis women and trans women who are so frequently displayed fully naked on film that it is, at this point, frankly an outrage. Now, moving on to a discussion of transgender filmmakers making films about transgender characters and actually getting it right. First off on our list, we have Silas Howard and Harry Dodge, co-directors who made a name for themselves as the first out-and-proud transgender directors, trans men directors, with 2001's By Hook or By Crook, an independent queer buddy film in which they also starred. Silas Howard would later go on to direct episodes of Pose and Transparent as well, the former of which, it should be noted, is executive produced by Janet Mock, who became the first transgender woman of color to write and direct a television episode on the same series in 2018, and the latter of which, Transparent, was created by non-binary producer, writer, director Joey Soloway. Joey Soloway, whose name I should note has changed since the beginning of this semester, meaning I had to update my notes on them from this class, is creditable with hiring a good number of transgender creators behind the camera for Transparent, including Silas Howard himself. This, of course, further illustrates the notion that we've brought up before, that perhaps people in positions of power in the film and television industries have a consistently demonstrated tendency to hire other people like themselves, regardless of what categories they belong to. So, just as women will hire other women, and as we discussed earlier, just as black creators will hire other black creators, or black women will hire other black women, so too, it seems, will gender dysphoric and non-conforming people hire other gender dysphoric and non-conforming people as well. So here we have a non-binary person hiring a trans person. Let's take a look at some of the fabulous and engaging work of these transgender and non-binary creators right now.
Hey, can we have some tequila and tab? Tequila and tab. Tequila and tab.
I don't have any tab. So how it all started was, a guy in my town had just got this new car. We were driving around Hannah County, jamming out to some Sabbath, talking about what we'd do with the dough if one of us hit the lottery. And what happened was we went over to the J&L for gas down on Route 60. Picked one. I think you should go home before the cops come, all right? You should go home now.
Okay, thank you.
You're here. I couldn't find you. I had to borrow some money from you, but I'll pay you back this afternoon.
Shy. Robert Plant. Robert Plant? Shy. Well, you don't shoot all the dogs just because one of them's got fleas. She's very lovely. I think she likes you. I think she likes you. No! I'm hungry enough to eat erasers. There's a bathroom! Okay, come on. I'm fresh, you know? I mean, like a peach, right? Like a peach. I mean, I'm so fresh right then. I can't even tell. Maybe I'm still hanging on the tree, you know? I'd say, buddy, it's not a good idea to fall in love with the brokenhearted. They'll break your heart. I look good to you now. But when I was a kid, I was really off my cake.
Dad? So I have something to tell you.
Oh my God. I have to tell him.
No.
Yes.
Allie's crazy.
Tell me what?
Dad is a woman.
Does Mom know?
Of course I know that. You think I'm a dummy? It's his thing. It's his little private kink. Everyone has one. Right, Rabbi?
Well, I guess everyone has, you know, one or two.
The reason that I feel so strong.
I have 3 kids. I can't live without my kids.
You know you gave me all.
Sarah's my oldest.
I was thinking about inviting Tammy and Grace over for a play date.
Does Len know that you spent your entire college years lesing it up together?
I like lesbians. There's Joshy. Okay, back. He's my very successful son. Always a different girlfriend.
Where are you going? Let's just hang out.
You really don't want to be alone, do you?
Then there's Allie.
Did you get a job yet?
Twerkout.com. That's our thing.
That's what I thought.
She just doesn't seem to be able to land. People live secret lives, and people live very lonely lives. Life is complicated.
Smiling makes sense to me.
You look like you're underwater, Uncle Joshy.
We're both underwater.
Yeah?
This whole house is under the ocean.
You know, this is a really big journey that we're on. And you've just started on it.
Well, you still make sense to me. Your message.
Will you just help me out here? Are you saying that you're going to start dressing up like a lady all the time?
No, honey, all my life, my whole life, I've been dressing up like a man. This is me.
time we remind the world who we are. Jackpot. Mother, what do we take? Everything.
The category is royalty.
How does someone as talented as you wind up dancing for a whole bunch of junkies?
I want to be a star.
You ever consider joining a house?
What do you mean?
Well, a house is a family you get to choose.
I have bigger dreams of performing at some ball. I have nowhere else to go.
Come here.
It's that white boy again. Is this your first time doing something like this?
Whispering love.
Yes. What exactly is a ball?
Balls are a gathering of people who are not welcome to gather anywhere else.
Darling, the champagne is burnt.
This is what it's like to be a person at the top of the rainbow room.
What's better, the dream or the reality?
The reality.
What do you want out of life?
I want to be treated like any other woman. That's my dream.
Twirl. Baby, you are our secret weapon.
And that is how you do a ball.
Now, I feel I should mention, of course, that when it comes to Transparent, there's some awkwardness with the main actor there relating to the Me Too movement, unfortunately. And also the fact that, it's unfortunately yet another case of a non-trans person playing a trans person. And that's problematic, and hopefully, we will be seeing less of that and more trans people playing themselves. That said, it's at least written and created by trans people. The portrayal self-contained within the show is relatively much better handled generally than when these things are done by cishet people. For what it's worth, I think that this also sort of goes to demonstrate the perpetuations of, bad tendencies, like we were talking about with the Complicated Women, showing more female nudity than male, even in a chick flick that, had a primarily, cishet female demographic. I also kind of feel like there's a parallel here with, trans people, gender dysphoric people, non-binary people, hiring a non-trans actor to play a trans person. It's just that this has been done so much. It's not great, but I think that even the people who are trying to make progress tend to fall into these historic pitfalls that, cishet whitey has basically lain for us all throughout. Anyway. So next up on our list, we have Kimberly Reed, the filmmaker whose autobiographical documentary Prodigal Sons from 2008 won her great acclaim, not only for delving into Reed's own life experience as a trans woman, but also because of the added hook that her adoptive brother, spoiler alert, turns out to be the illegitimate secret grandson of famed Hollywood actor Orson Welles. Let's take a look at 2008's Prodigal Sons right now.
When we are young, age has no meaning.
Let's run down the Bengal offense for you. They're led by senior quarterback Paul McCarroll.
I had a horrible accident when I was young, and then I had part of my brain removed.
And this is what he said to me. Yes, this is what he said to me.
Imagine finding out after 38 years your family tree is recognizable to just about every classic movie fan.
I know what it is to be young. But you don't know what it is to be old. Someday, you'll be saying the same thing time takes away, so the story is told.
Though not directly a trans story like Prodigal Sons, Kimberly Reed's more recent documentary Dark Money from 2018, which she wrote, directed, produced, and did the cinematography for, so maybe you might say auteured, is a groundbreaking expose on the extremely toxic and undemocratic practices that American politics have been engaging in since the Citizens United decision was passed in 2010. This film perhaps places Kimberly Reed in the traditional category of women behind the camera who follow in the Bernie Sanders tradition of Lois Weber and all the others, using the filmic medium again to highlight progressive issues and lobby for political change. To demonstrate these points, let's take a look at 2018's Dark Money right now.
You know, the number one rule of political or watchdog reporting is follow the money.
John Adams here. I covered the legislature for the Great Falls Tribune.
A source of mine had come across something that I might be interested in.
Voters in your district had never seen something.
No, this was a whole new political attack.
They send out all these mailings. They don't care if they lie.
Nobody knows who they are. They call them dark money groups, and that's exactly what they are.
Corporation funnels money to a dark money group. They send out postcards attacking the opponent. When that candidate gets elected, they support the agenda of the corporation.
I don't know how to fight them. I can't pick up the phone and say, hey, what's your interest in candidate X? Because I don't know who they are. And it's not just Montana.
Campaign finance is the gateway to every other issue that you might care about.
Americans are barraged by these political advertisements that are funded by who knows whom. We don't even know if they're domestic.
Politics is just child's play to business. They know how to manipulate the system. You can buy the politicians, you can buy the judges.
When I first got to the FEC, I thought that we would work together on issues such as disclosure.
If A fails 3-3, Oceans fails 3-3, that fails 3-3.
The FEC will not enforce the law.
New allegations in court against a leading legislator.
What's at stake is whether or not Art Whittick broke Montana campaign finance laws.
Do we care enough to demand that politicians comply with our campaign laws?
The bottom line is, did Whittick know that he was receiving all of these services?
I'm going to call it like I see it. This man cheated.
The people who want to keep dark money have a real problem. The public does not agree with them.
They want a government that works for them. It doesn't work for special interests, doesn't work for political parties, it works for them.
This is scary stuff, but I think this is the proving ground now for the American experiment.
Believe it or not, that's not only it for tonight, that's it for our entire class this semester. What? Well, yeah, actually, kind of, not really. There's still the final project, which, as you know, will be due no later than 8:30 p.m. next week on November 17th, the notorious reading day that has messed with our schedule. And then the final exam the week after that. For those of you who may be wondering, the final exam, I should note, will consist of a vocabulary section, a long one, probably some multiple choice, matching, maybe true, false, we'll see how I feel. A short answer section, you know what question to look out for, I hope. Maybe this semester the whole class will get it right, I can dream. And finally, an open-ended essay portion where you'll be presented with a selection of 5 questions to choose from. Don't answer all 5, please only answer 1, just choose 1 and answer in essay format. No need for sources or anything, obviously, just write it as you will. Since, of course, I have no way of stopping you, and my goodness, have we had a lot of vocabulary this semester, you are officially welcome to use your notes on the final exam. So please consider it an open notes final. Good luck and do your best. I will be emailing you on the date, November 24th, to let you know when the final exam is posted to the Assignments tab of Web Campus. It will go live at 6 p.m. on the 24th and will remain available until 8:30 p.m., giving you 2.5 hours to complete it, the full length of our regular allotted class time, which I think will be more than enough for everyone, so don't worry. Before we end, however, your final hidden assignment tonight is to email me and let me know if you intend to attend our final Zoom meeting next week on our optional reading day class, and whether you would like me to start it any earlier than 8 p.m. Since it will be our last meeting, I just wanted to make sure that everyone who wanted to would have the chance to attend, ask questions, chat, whatever, to their satisfaction, and I figured that this would be the easiest way to gauge, who wanted to come and how long we might need. So for now, enjoy the credit sequence of the final pre-recorded video lesson of Women Behind the Camera, and once you're done enjoying it, be sure to email me with your last hidden assignment for the semester, which will be due no later than midnight tonight. One final thing that I will note here is that the course evaluations, I will be sending them to you, and I would really appreciate it if you could fill them out. It would be very helpful to me to know what everybody thought, where I can improve, how to make this better for next semester. In so doing, I should note, however, that when you fill out the open comment section, the only person who sees those comments is me. So there's not like my boss or somebody doesn't get those. I'm the only person who gets those. So please don't write anything that you wouldn't want me personally to read. Please do that when I send you the link. I will be emailing it, and I would really appreciate it if you could do that so that the future generations who take this class will have it better, and we can improve and move ever forward into the future like a technology graph and not a stock market one. Good work, well done, and congratulations to you all for being such an excellent class. I will miss you.
An elephant never forgets.
Yes!